Hey, this is Amanda Hammett, and this is the Millennial Rockstar podcast. All right, so today's rockstar is Rocky Voria from Microsoft. And the thing that you're going to notice right off the bat with Rocky is that she's incredibly intelligent, articulate, and passionate. And one of the things that Microsoft has done for her is that they've given her a platform in which to share her passions, which happen to be women and millennials. So tune in and see what Rocky has to share with us today. Hey, this is Amanda Hammett, and today's episode of the Millennial Rockstar podcast has a very special guest because this is Rocky Voria on the Rockstar podcast. Rocky, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So Rocky actually is coming to us from Microsoft's headquarters in Seattle right now, correct?
Correct.
All right. So you're actually at home and not traveling the world like normal.
Yeah, for once. Nice.
Wonderful. So Rocky, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what makes you a rock star?
Sure. Okay. Well, a little bit about me and my background. I grew up in Colorado, went to Colorado College, and then I went to the University of Oxford for graduate school. And it was there actually that I came in contact with a Microsoft recruiter, and now I've been working at Microsoft for 6 years. So like many millennials, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do after school. All I knew was that I had an interest in business. And what I loved about Microsoft was that it offered so many options and experiences. I mean, there were products spanning across consumer and enterprise. There were offices all over the world. There were jobs in every business function imaginable. And so as someone starting off fresh in the working world, all of those options and experiences were just different possibilities for me, which was really exciting. So I've been at Microsoft, as I said, now for 6 years. I've worked on 3 different teams. I started in a licensing role, then I moved to a business development role supporting a financing organization. And today I'm a chief of staff to our corporate vice president of inside sales, which has been a lot of fun because it's an exciting part of the company. It's pretty much a brand new organization. I was one of the first employees 2 years ago, and now we have 1,800 people globally across 8 different sales centers. So it's been an amazing experience for me as someone who's relatively new to the workforce to be part of building something new and having the chance to see all the nuts and bolts of running a business.
That's awesome. That's been a really major build that you guys have done. And I've been just really impressed kind of watching from the outside what you've done. So on top of everything else that you're doing at Microsoft, you also have some side hustles that you're doing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. In addition to my day job, the first is I co-chair the Women at Microsoft board, which is basically our company-wide women's organization here, which is focused around attracting, advancing, and retaining women. I'm super passionate about advancing women in business. It's been a common theme throughout my life. I grew up with my single mom. I spent time in India during my undergraduate, researching on women's empowerment for my college thesis. I wrote my master's dissertation on female employment policies in China and India. So basically leading women at Microsoft has been a great way for me to continue exercising that passion internally at Microsoft. But it's also given me a really great platform to create connections across different companies to help move the needle for women. So that's the first one. My second side hustle, I guess, is I write regular articles for Forbes. I'm a member of the Forbes Business Development Council, and so as part of that, I provide some quotes and expertise on sales and business development topics, and I also have the opportunity to write my own articles. So if you look them up, you'll see that they're primarily focused on actually tips for millennials and for women, and so it's been a lot of fun. I encourage people to read and comment and share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I shared one of your latest articles about why more women need to get into sales on my LinkedIn profile. And I had several young women that I mentor or that I've met throughout the years reach out to me and say, hey, can we talk about this? And I'm like, yes, we can. So fantastic. So thank you for spurring that conversation. That's awesome. So, all right. You walked us through kind of high level your background. So tell us a little bit about what's worked for you throughout your career so far.
I would say that there are probably 3 specific things that come to mind here. I think number one of the first things that's worked for me is I work for a company that doesn't require me to leave my passions at home. You just heard a little bit about what some of those are. It's advancing women and millennials, it's writing, and as you heard, I found ways to be able to do those things in addition to my day job, both inside and outside of Microsoft. And I've also had managers who have supported these efforts. And I think that's something that's really important to millennials, because unlike previous generations who wanted work-life balance and separation, millennials actually want work-life integration. We want to bring our whole self to work. We want to have personal relationships with our coworkers. We want to share our passions in the workplace. So I think it's really important for companies to find ways to foster an environment that's really conducive to that. The second thing that I would say is I think what's worked well for me is I haven't been shy to kind of leverage my unique qualities and use them to my advantage. When I first entered the workforce, actually, there were certain people who told me, maybe you should hide your age to gain credibility, or, act like a man because technology is such a male-dominated field. And I sort of asked myself, why? What's so bad about being young, or what's so bad about being a woman? I mean, I think, in fact, those qualities actually have helped me contribute even more at work. So I think that, as a millennial who's relatively new to the workforce, I actually offer a really fresh perspective that allows me to change the business and look at things differently. And that's what I've done over the past 6 years at Microsoft. In fact, we actually started a cross-generation mentoring program, which we proactively pair millennials with senior leaders for this very reason. And we've all heard the statistics that millennials are going to make up 50% of the workforce in the next 2 years. So I think it's about time we start to really understand what are some of the millennial strengths around being well-connected and tech-savvy and energetic. And then I guess, the last thing that I would say that's worked well for me, I think it's all about being really proactive in learning the jobs that I've had, networking, building my brand. I think in my first year at Microsoft, I did probably 100 different informational meetings with people. So probably 1 to 2 meetings with different people every week. And I just wanted to learn more about what do they do on a day-to-day basis and what's their background, and walk me through your career development. And not only did I learn from those meetings, but it really helped me get a chance to meet with a lot of different people across different parts of the company and the world. And those are relationships that I've definitely leveraged as I've sort of continued in my career path. So I always encourage people that I mentor, be really proactive and get out there, because it's super easy to stay siloed within your organization, but it's way better for the long run if you kind of take the initiative.
That's great. Well, I can just speak from my experience with you is that you have, you and I have been involved with the same organization that's international, and you have leveraged that, and you are incredibly networked within that organization. And when I first came into it, everybody was like, "Oh, have you met Rocky?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't, but your reputation preceded you." Let's just say
that. Thanks.
So, obviously, you talked a lot about some things that have worked for you, but I would imagine there might have been a bump or two in the road so far, these 6 years in. Tell us about that.
Definitely. I would have to say that I think what hasn't worked for me actually is saying yes to everything. So millennials, we're known for seizing opportunities, right? So I would definitely say that I was like that earlier on in my career, and I still am, but back then, I would say yes to everything. If there was a stretch project in the organization, I would raise my hand for that. If a team needed volunteers for a special assignment, I would raise my hand for that. So I was just super eager, I think, and I wanted to get involved in everything so I could learn as much as I could and be someone who was known to be willing to do anything to help contribute to team success. And then I suddenly saw myself getting pulled into everything, and I got some really good coaching from my manager at the time, about a year working into Microsoft. And he told me, "Look, Rocky, when you're doing a good job, everybody's going to want you to help and to be on your team. Like, you've proven yourself. Now you get to decide what you take on. Be really strategic about the give-get. And, if someone asks you to do something, it's okay to first say, what am I going to get out of this? Or at least think through it, right?" So this coaching is something that I am so thankful for, and I think about it even today because, he was right. I mean, now I'm not saying if you're a millennial 60 days into role, if your manager asks you to do something, you should say, what am I going to get out of it? I mean, you definitely need to use your judgment, but I think his principle is right. And I wish I had kind of learned that a little bit earlier because, it would help me be a little bit more focused and understand where I was spending my time and put it in the right efforts.
Oh, that is such good advice. I mean, I think that there are some people further along in their careers that could use that advice.
Definitely.
So fantastic. All right. So you mentioned a little bit about this particular manager and how he saw you potentially struggling a little bit, and so he helped you through that. Were there any other mentors or managers that you've had that have helped you or have done anything in particular that really keeps you engaged and motivated and ready to wake up every day, regardless of what country you're in, saying, all right, let's move Microsoft forward?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as it relates to your question around mentors, for me, I've definitely surrounded myself with a really solid set of mentors. I kind of have a board of advisors that I call them, which consists of a mix of people. Of course, it's my formal manager, but then it's also a set of, executives across the company who I look to for career advice, or peers that I look to for on-the-job advice, or some days it's my mom who grew up in a very different world and started her own business, or a friend in a completely different industry to provide just a completely new and different perspective. So I can't stress the importance of having all of these people, I guess, in your inner circle to guide, provide counsel as you navigate through some of the stumbling blocks. One thing in particular, actually, that's been really valuable to me over the past year is having a formal executive coach. So about a year ago, Microsoft invested in me having an external coach. So this is a professional who is trained in coaching emerging and senior leaders. And it's made a pretty significant impact, I'd say, on me because my coach has so much experience just helping people negotiate and communicate at the highest level. So, since working with her, I've been promoted. I've moved into a people manager role. And I think part of it is just she's really helped me have the right conversations with my manager in order to make these things happen. And, it's great to have a variety of mentors in your life, but this is actually the first time I've had a formal external coach. And it's been really valuable to have someone with an outside perspective and also the formal training to help me navigate through some of these issues and challenges.
That is fantastic. I have a bunch of questions and I'm just like, oh, which one do I go to first? Yeah. Okay. So let me circle back for a second before I go to your executive coach. Let me circle back to your board of advisors. Now you mentioned a few obvious people like your mom and people like that. But what about the people within Microsoft that are senior leaders? How did you approach them? Walk us through what that looked like and how did you put this together?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that I just sort of reached out to people, really. There's a funny story that my first boss always likes to tell. He's like, Rocky's not afraid to ask anybody for time, because when I was at Microsoft on my first week, I actually ran into our chief marketing officer, like literally physically. We ran out into each other walking out of the bathroom. And we sort of just randomly struck up a conversation. He was extremely kind and welcoming, knowing that it was my first week at the company. And at the end of it, he kind of said, well, if you want to chat about anything or need any advice, feel free to reach out anytime. And I'm sure that was just sort of like a nice blanket thing that he says to anyone. But I said, well, he offered me his time, so why don't I just reach out to him? So I did. I sent him a note and I said, thanks so much for the quick chat. I would love to pick your brain as I'm new to the company. I want to learn a little bit more about how I can make an immediate impact and get your coaching since you've navigated well through your career. Would you mind if I grab 30 minutes of your time? And he said, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's a funny story because, I mean, like as a wide-eyed millennial, I didn't even think like, oh, this guy's our chief marketing officer. He's totally out of reach. I just thought, this is someone who's clearly spent some time investing in others, and it sounds like he's open to a conversation. So why not seize the opportunity? And I think that's one of the things that I've just sort of done along the way, as I mentioned, being proactive. I mean, I've definitely noticed there are a lot of people at Microsoft who are very willing to give you their time, and people outside of Microsoft too. All you have to do is ask. And I don't think I've ever been told no to a meeting. So I'd really encourage a lot of people, just don't be afraid. Take the risk, ask them for a meeting. If they say no, whatever, they're probably not going to remember you anyways. But at least you tried.
That is such great advice. I love that. I love that. I love that. I do hear a lot, especially when I'm on college campuses and I'm talking to students about, hey, why don't you set up some informational interviews, as you're getting going. Oh, I don't know. And I'm like, you need to. This will help you. I promise.
Yes.
So I thank you. I'm going to take that snippet out and I'm going to send it to people.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the culture within Microsoft. Obviously, everybody hears all the stories and reads the articles, but tell us a little bit about the culture within Microsoft as a whole. But also, I'd like to hear a little bit about the interesting culture or subculture that your particular team has.
Definitely. I think there are a couple things that probably come to mind here for me as I think about Microsoft. First, Microsoft does a really great job of reminding me that what we're doing is truly changing the world. And that's really important to me and most millennials because we really want to make a difference. There was a recent study by a group called the Intelligent Group. They focused kind of on youth preferences, and it showed that 64% of millennials say it's a priority to make the world a better place. So it's definitely something that I thought about as I was exploring companies straight after graduate school, and I wanted to work at a company that was changing the world, and I saw that Microsoft was through its technology. So I think it's really important for companies to really tie their mission, I guess, to societal contribution, and for managers to constantly remind millennials that the work that they're doing actually ties to something that is making a difference. So that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about Microsoft. I think the other thing I would say is really variety that I think has kept me engaged. As I mentioned earlier, I targeted a job at a company like Microsoft because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, and Microsoft offered a plethora of options and experiences. And when I first started here, I very quickly threw out the idea of a career ladder, and I instead focused on gaining a set of skills and experiences that I think would set me up for the long run. And so, as I mentioned, I've been able to differentiate my experiences by having roles in sales and business development and finance. And I've sort of almost been able to create kind of like a liberal arts experience for myself here at Microsoft and sort of a portfolio career, I guess, as you talk about it.
That's great.
But, millennials, a lot of people refer to us as the job hopping generation. And I think just having this type of environment where variety is offered is really important to us because we want to take on new challenges. We sometimes want to take on horizontal challenges, but still grow vertically at the same time. And Microsoft has done a great job of kind of allowing me to do that. And it's really interesting because I think as I think about some of the previous generations, a lot of people just sort of chose a career path and they worked their way up. But that's not really of interest to most millennials, I'd say. I think we want to differentiate our experiences. We want to try new things, develop new skills. And Microsoft has really fostered a culture where I've been able to do all of those things.
Oh, that's awesome. So talk a little bit now about your particular team and what you guys have built.
Yeah, so Inside Sales, as I mentioned, it's a brand new organization at Microsoft. Much of our workforce is actually millennial. Much of our workforce is also senior. So we have a pretty diverse mix of people all over the world. I think what's unique about Inside Sales actually is that 70% of our organization was hired externally. So we had just an amazing opportunity to really build a culture from scratch by taking all of these experiences from people who have worked at some of the best companies in the industry, bringing them here, taking some talent who have been at Microsoft for a long time, and then thinking through, like, what do we want to do with all of that, and how are we going to build the right culture? And fortunately, I work for a leader who's really passionate about this topic as well. And so we spend a lot of time thinking through how are we making Inside Sales the best place to work and grow? And we have a lot of people-related initiatives, many of which I actually lead myself. So started a group called the People First Ambassadors, where we have basically different inside sellers and managers all over the world who are representing the voice of inside sales. And like I said, just making it a better place to work and grow by developing different initiatives and plans and programs and offering different perks and experiences. But it's been really amazing because I think it could have gone one of two ways. You hire all these people and you don't give them the right infrastructure or support. It may not pan out as you would have liked, but I've had the chance to go to all 8 of our sales centers over the past 6 to 8 months, and I can definitely say that the culture is the same everywhere. And I think part of that is just really intentional about it, which is exciting.
That is very exciting. One of the things that I would love for you to share, and this is for other companies that are looking to build, even if it's not inside sales, a new division, or they're looking to start their culture over from scratch. One of the things that I really appreciated is that you guys had a major focus on diversity. And even when you were told, oh, no, that can't be done, you guys didn't take no for an answer. So can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yes, absolutely. So, obviously when you're hiring 1,800 people at scale, there are trade-offs that you supposedly have to. Diversity was not one of them for us. It's really important. And I think there were challenges definitely along the way. But our goal was to have 50% diversity within inside sales. Now, we're not there 100% across the globe, but there actually are places like in Asia where more than 50% is female, as an example.
Wow.
And Asia in particular is actually a really challenging place to hire talent for tech and that are female. And so we've been really proud of some of the work that we've done and the culture that we foster. But I think part of that is just pushing HR to have that conversation. I think there were definitely times, as you said, where people said, well, the talent pool isn't there. And the reality is it is there. We just have to make more of an effort. And there are things that you need to do in order to do that. So specifically for women, as an example, we've all heard the statistics that, I think it was by IBM. They did a report a few years ago. They said that women only apply for the job when they meet 100% of the qualifications, whereas men apply for the job when they think they meet 60%. And so we need to be really thoughtful about the language that we're using in job descriptions, even for our inside sales team. Do we want to use words like hungry and competitive and things like that? Or do we want to use kind of a more softer language that might cater to more women? So those are the things that we've had to be really thoughtful about, just to widen the pool as much as possible and push our HR teams to lead to this outcome.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's one of my favorite stories, because not only did you guys hit enormous numbers and just hiring over a very short amount of time, but you guys did it in a very thoughtful way, which is usually not the case. So I personally appreciate that. So for our younger audience members, is there anything that you think made you stand out in the applicant pool back 6 years ago when you were fresh out of grad school? What was it about you that made you a rock star on resume paper?
I think part of it was just demonstrating a track record of success. The reality is most millennials are not going to have the previous experience that employers are looking for. So I think we instead just need to show that our past experience, whatever it may be, whether it was sports, whether it was internships, whatever, that all of those results were actually the same, regardless of what the task was at hand, that we were able to demonstrate success, see things through. And I think that's what I did. I had never worked at a major tech company, but I had some great internships across various industries. I performed well academically. I had won full rights to school. I think all of those things kind of collectively, hopefully, showed Microsoft that I was someone who was willing to learn, who had somewhat of an aptitude to be successful, provided I was given the right training and skills development opportunities. So yeah, that's what I.
Fantastic. So is there anything that you wish other companies knew about hiring millennials? Is there anything that you hear complaints about, or is there anything you just wish that they knew?
Yeah, I think the first one I would say is don't underestimate the importance of giving some of your younger millennial employees flexibility. Millennials really want flexibility in how, where, and when we work. There was actually a really great millennial study that Deloitte put out last year, which shows that 75% of millennials, they want the ability to work from home or somewhere other than the office, and they think that that's where they can unleash more creativity. And the study actually found that in most markets, work-life balance came before career progression when evaluating job opportunities. So we shouldn't underestimate how important a flexible lifestyle is for this generation. I think the other thing that I might add is, we hear a lot about these whole employee perks, and I think that's a really funny topic, because people always say, oh, millennials, they want free food and candy and bean bags and nap pods, otherwise they're not going to be happy. And I think those things are all great. but there's actually no formal data that shows that that's enough to retain your millennial employees, right? And I think it's kind of a generalization that's been driven by movies like The Internship and stuff like that. And for me, the number one thing that I've seen personally as a millennial, and then also through a lot of our millennial workforce here at Microsoft, is they want to have differentiated experiences, which I talked about a little bit ago. But I think companies that win with millennials are those that offer experiences. So as an example, the topic of how millennials are approaching business travel has become really prevalent recently. So I'm definitely one of those people, but in that same Deloitte study, actually, it said that 78% of millennials intentionally carve out personal time during a business trip. I do that myself. I mean, I think I've been to 5 continents and 20 countries over the past time that I've been at Microsoft, but I'm always looking to turn those business vacations into workations, I guess, because I think it makes my trips more balanced and memorable. So I think those are some things that a lot of people probably don't really know about when they think about millennials, but I would encourage people to look at that Deloitte study. Actually, there's a lot of bits in there. We can send the link.
Yeah, that is a great study. It is actually one of my favorites. So, all right, is there anything, just one last thing, is there anything that you think that you wish that companies did to make the hiring process easier for millennials in particular?
There are 2 things that come to mind for this. The first one was what I mentioned earlier. It's just being more cognizant of the language that's used on job descriptions. Most job descriptions say that you need 2 to 5 years of relevant experience. Even jobs that are targeted actually toward university and graduate hires say this for some reason. I think it's just standard verbiage that's often included, but a lot of people take those job requirements quite literally, and they hold themselves back, unfortunately, because they don't think they'll be considered. And as I mentioned earlier, women in particular have that issue. So if you compound, being a woman and being a millennial, that's a whole pool of really great talent that you might miss out on if you're not being thoughtful about the language in the job descriptions. Great. The second thing that I would mention is, I would love to see more bigger companies targeting smaller schools, actually, as they think about university hires. Unfortunately, a lot of the big companies, like the big tech firms, Procter & Gamble, McKinsey, et cetera, they target some of the tier 1 schools, so basically Ivy Leagues. And there are a lot of great liberal arts colleges, including the college that I went to for undergrad, that unfortunately, those students don't really get access to some of those top tier companies. And so it's a conversation I've even had internally with some of our Microsoft HR teams, because I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded and thoughtful about how and where we're recruiting so that we're not missing out on a great talent pool.
I agree. I could not agree with that more. I love it. I also went to a small liberal arts college. I hear you. I completely hear you. And I have those conversations a lot as well with companies. So, well, Rocky, this has been fantastic. I mean, I already knew you were a rock star, but now everyone else will get to see that you're a rock star. So, but thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for bringing so much knowledge and passion to this interview.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Millennial Rockstar Podcast. If you are looking for even more information on millennials and some free resources, visit my website at amandahammett.com. The link is below. It's amandahammett.com. There you can download a free millennial employee engagement guide that will give you all kinds of tips and tricks on how to keep those millennials engaged on a day-to-day basis. Because we all know that millennials who are happy at work are more productive at work.